just the adventure side of it, which for me was a large part of it, was that building your own house and learning how to do all of that is kind of nuts, and a little bit crazy.
Talks with Tim Ulrich de Shaw. Today we have from New Zealand, Matt Lillis. Did I say it right?
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah, cool. Matt, it's like in the evening at your place and in the morning at my place, so that's pretty funny.
It is.
Yeah. And I saw you on this YouTube channel, Living Big in a Tiny House, I think it's called, in February. And there they showed your beautiful little tiny house. And that's what we're gonna talk today. So my first question is, what inspired you to build a tiny house?
Oh, so there's a lot of different reasons to build a tiny house. People talk a lot about the cost savings. There's a bit of a housing crisis in New Zealand at the moment. So there's tiny houses are obviously a much cheaper way to house yourself. But there's also just the adventure side of it, which for me was a large part of it, was that building your own house and learning how to do all of that is kind of nuts, and a little bit crazy, but also one of these adventures you learn a lot along the journey when you grow as a person, and for me that was one of the biggest draws of building a house, of building a tiny house.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like my grandfather here in Germany, he was also a construction builder, and he built like 2 houses in our family. He built the first house for him and my mother and the brother of my mother. So I don't know what's that in English in translating. Uncle, yes, exactly. And then my mother divorced, and I was like 5 or 6. I don't really remember. And then she was like, so, oh yeah, we're gonna move into an apartment. And he was like, so, not gonna happen. I'm building another house. And then he built another house, moved into that, and we got the old house. And then he built even the house for my uncle. So he built 3 houses. And I'm blown away by that fact now, because later, when I was a child, I didn't think about it. So like, yeah, he built it. So no matter. But then I realized, oh shit, he built like 3 houses. That's intense.
That's a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
Huge work.
And everything, like there were not like anybody is not coming out to build the plumbing or whatever. He just built everything. Yeah. So obviously in a tiny house, it's a little bit more like, I wouldn't say it's easier, but
there's certainly less work involved.
A little bit. So how difficult was it to build a tiny house, and were you relieved at the end when it was done, or was it like, so I can build that and add that and add that, and is it a never-ending process, or how was it?
I mean, a house, certainly a self-built house, is never finished. So certainly there were stages along the journey where I was relieved. Moving into it for the first time, it absolutely wasn't finished then, but that was a huge milestone. And then getting to a point where I had sort of all of the plumbing, I could have a hot shower in my house, was a pretty fantastic moment. And yeah, once it was all functional, I kind of put a lot of stuff on the back burner and said, you know what, I'll finish it, but I've had enough for a while.
Cool. How long did it take you to build
it? So it took a year from start to having it functionally finished, and then like forever there'll be little bits and pieces that I or someone else will change to as what it's used for changes and adapts, and its location changes and things like that.
1 year, yeah. And we chatted some back and forth with email, and you were telling me that you at the moment like planning or are in the process of selling the house and building another one. So that's pretty interesting for me, because like selling a tiny house which you build on your own is like, for me, that isn't that hard. So like giving away your baby or stuff, like I can only imagine, like, is it like I don't have anything in comparison other than like I was a guitar I was a guitar player before I started photography, and I have this guitar which is in my life for like 20 or 25 years, and then 2 years ago I sold it, and it was like this moment like, am I really gonna sell it? Who is worthy like getting it? Like there was this thought in my head, and on the other hand it's like, yeah, like I think the minimal possessions you have in your life, it's always better. Like when I'm selling something which is really big or I have big feelings for, when I finally sell it, I feel like a little bit also relieved. Like when I sold my car, when I moved into the city, I decided I don't need a car anymore, so I sold it, and it was like a big relief. So I don't have this car which I have to pay for, and when anything is broken, like I have this feeling, so oh fuck this car. When I finally sold it, it was like a big relief for me, and that's when I learned that when you give stuff away, it's always freeing. So how was it like, or how is it like planning or selling your house?
Yeah, so I'd say it's very similar to your experience of it. So I mean, there's certainly an element of attachment, but part of having a tiny house and trying to live a minimalist life is about not being attached to possessions, and so there's that element of it as well. How does it feel now? I think so. As you say, I'm in the process of selling it, and once it has sold, like I know there'll be a sense of relief, and that although it's a tiny house, it's also by far and away like the largest thing that I own value-wise. Like the next thing down would be my car, and then my laptop, or my tent, actually. Well, yes, my tent would be my third most expensive position. But yeah, so it's huge, as a position in terms of how much of my work and money and everything else is tied up in it. But also when I built my first tiny house, you think to yourself, I'm shrinking my world down to this house, so that's going to be able to be driven on the road. So that's really small, and I want to build quite a big house within the constraints of what is a tiny house. But what I learned since is that actually the value of having a house that's really mobile and a little bit smaller, lighter, you can shift with a smaller vehicle, and focuses more on things like being able to be off-grid, so not tied to water and electricity, is more valuable than that extra space, and so that's what I really want to focus on with the next tiny house, which I've been kind of obsessively designing over the past while, trying to get to a point where I'd be able to basically take it anywhere fairly casually, take it away for a week with everything just left in it, and then come back again, park it up in a paddock if I wanted to for a month, and be able to live there without having to have another source of water or power. So yeah, that's the dream.
Cool. That sounds awesome. So, and have you thought about like selling the house? Like, have you thought about like a worthy buyer? Like, is it only like family and friends, or how will the process be? Will it have like a selection show?
I mean, I certainly care where it ends up. Like there's a lot of emotional investment in wanting to make sure that it ends up safely to its next destination, and that it ends up with someone who's going to appreciate it. But I think most people who are seriously in the market for a tiny house are the kind of people that I would want to live in
Yeah.
and appreciate my tiny house. So like, I'm not too worried about, you know, it ending up in the wrong hands, or, you know, someone not maintaining it, or you know, getting run down. Like, I think the tiny house community and people who are in that sort of space are really cool people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a selective group, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
I can see
you've got to
that.
be quite minimalist. Like, it's not for everybody. It's certainly, you know, people talk about it. You know, is it a solution to the housing crisis we have here? Well, probably not, in the sense that maybe 1% of people in our society, it would be a good idea for, or, you know, could live in it. But for that 1% of people, it's fantastic. It's yeah, such a good option.
Yeah, I think so. And so the next one will be your second house. Is there any consideration like getting into the builder side of the tiny house business?
In terms of like building it myself, or
Building it for others, maybe?
oh, for others, right? Because I did build the last one myself. That's a good question. The answer at the moment is probably not. Like, I think a lot of people who are building tiny houses are building them because they want quite cheap accommodation, as well as the other benefits that come with it. But, you know, they're not necessarily people with a lot of money, and it's hard to get mortgages to fund them and things like that. So my view on it is that the margins are quite tight if you want to go into business building tiny houses. And so for me, it's something I definitely want to, you know, do for myself. But at this point, I'm not really seriously thinking about you know, doing that as a profession or business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because like I can't speak for Europe in general, but in Germany, it's like my girlfriend and me, we are planning to live in a tiny house in the near future. And in Germany, the market is like, it's rising. There are a lot of like builders coming up these days, and the prices are like skyrocketing for it. So
it's interesting. Yeah. Because
so in Germany, it's not like, if you don't build it by yourself, it's not cheap.
mm-hmm.
You can say that for sure. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of
I think
builders
I think it's going more in that direction in New Zealand as well. Like, having said all of that, I know that there's a lot of demand at the moment. We had a like 20% house price rise in the space of a year.
Wow.
During a global pandemic. So, and that's on the back of years and years of massive house price increases. So there are a lot of people at the moment who are looking at it. It might be changing a bit.
That's also interesting. I thought about that a lot during the pandemic. So the housing market, the real estate market, it's not dropping. It's not dropping at all because of the pandemic. It's like everything else dropped, like the stock market or whatever. It all dropped, but the housing market is just the same. So I'm wondering if there's some crash coming up in the next years. But I don't know. So. Yeah. But I'm interested, what makes a home for you? What makes a home? Be it a conventional or a tiny house? What are the key features for you to be, oh, this is my home. I feel home here.
Well, I'm an engineer, so certainly functionality comes into it. You know, like I like living in a minimalist environment, but I still want to have the things that make a house a house. So, like, I'm not going to dispense with a shower and things like that. I'll look at ways of, you know, massively reducing the energy use and water use of a shower. But I do want all of those features. And certainly, like, I think a house does become an expression of you, particularly if you build it yourself. So, you know, like, minimalism is definitely a value that I hold quite close to my heart. And so, like, I quite like that in terms of, you know, both how a house is built, but also the aesthetic of the house. I also really like, I guess, an aesthetic that's that's quite warm. So my last tiny house, it was all kind of exposed woods, and where I wanted lighter colors, I'd use wood, but I'd whitewash it so that you still get the grain coming through, but it's quite light, and that makes it kind of feel warm and homely, and something I like coming back to, and feels cozy and secure. So those things are really important to me. But also, I think I'm coming to realize more the place that that your home is a big part of that as well. And so for me, I really enjoy spending time in the outdoors. So having a house that you can shift around, but also that you can site somewhere that's kind of close to nature, is really important to me.
Yeah, that's cool. That was one thing which inspired me watching your episode where they showed your tiny house, because it like you said, it was an expression of you, so it had a lot of like soul in it. I really like that because of the
thank you.
colors and the stuff. And I want to shift gears now a little bit, because in the tiny house you had this this board up where you put like goals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I read a lot about your spirituality on it, but it wasn't a part of the video, so I was really interested in it. And my first question with that part is, what defines being present for you?
Being present?
Yeah.
Okay. An interesting one. So I guess, well, being present, being in the moment, I guess, just collecting some thoughts here. There's, I think a lot of the way that people live at the moment is very caught up in things that grab your attention and pull your attention around it. So, we all know about social media and advertising and things like that, billboards and everything else that works to snatch your attention and take it to other places that you don't intend it to be.
Yep.
And I feel like that really reduces sort of the value of what you're doing. You don't sort of look back in 10 years' time and remember that post that you spent way too long reading on Facebook. And so for me, being present is trying as much as possible to disconnect from those sorts of things, and to be really intentional with your time and your energy, and so to sort of step back from life, think about what's really important to you, and that's what you've seen on the board is my way of structuring that, of having your at the top your values, the things that kind of underpin everything that you do, and coming down from that, setting intentions. So okay, these are the things that are important to me, therefore I'm going to do these things, and then kind of breaking it down into, okay, well, what do I actually do to achieve that, and then trying to sort of set some daily goals to align with what you've decided is important to you. So yeah, for me, I think that defines being present, being really intentional with the time that you use.
Cool. That leads perfectly to my next question, because I read on a board that you wrote up walk the camino, and that totally like underlines what you said, because of the distractions and the everything which is around you and distracts you from just being there. Because I walked the camino 3 times in my life now. I walked the old camino, the Frances, and the Portuguese one, and and there's, every time I walk it, there's this moment like when I walk it, I don't take my phone with it. I send my phone to Santiago, and when I'm arriving, I can have it and like structure my flight back or whatever. But I have nothing with me which connects me to the normal life back home. So, and there's always this moment, like when you walk for, it's basically around like 2 weeks, when you walked for 2 weeks, there's this moment where you like thought about everything. You thought about the past, what's coming up in the future. You thought about every person in your life, what you feel about them or your relationships. There's this moment where you have nothing to think about anymore, and then you're just walking, and then you're just there, and that's the most amazing moment on these walks every time. So I realize it, and then I'm just there, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just here now. I'm just walking, and that's amazing. So being just in a moment. So have you walked the Camino yet, or is it still on your to-do list?
No, so I was intending to have walked it by now. Obviously, COVID has changed plans. I really like your idea of sending a phone to the end. I might do that as well. I have walked the South Island of the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand. So that's the trail that goes the whole length of New Zealand, and it takes sort of 4 to 6 months to do the whole thing. For half of it, which I did, was a couple of months of walking, and I think it's similar, but it's got its differences. So it's another like long distance hike, but I think it's more about the wilderness experience. You go for the longest I spent in between being in towns where I could buy anything was about 5 days, and so you're sleeping in your tent and stuff.
Cool.
Which was awesome. But I think the Camino has got. They've obviously both got a lot of similarities in terms of just like the headspace that you can get into and things like that. But I think the Camino, the cultural experience, the people, the food and the communal, sleeping arrangements and stuff. I think that with the Te Araroa, like you really connect with nature, and when you get past that thing of thinking about other things, you're just in some mountains. Whereas I think with the Camino, I haven't done it yet, you probably get to the same space, but then it's really about connecting with the people who you're walking with.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest part. And it's so funny when you like on my last one, on the first day, I met this I think 18-year-old girl and a 54-year-old guy from Australia. And then we walked the whole way together. Like on the first day we met, and then we walked the whole way together. And I always thought like it's such a, like on the Camino, the normal things of life doesn't matter. Like age doesn't matter, where you come from doesn't matter, what you're believing in, it just doesn't matter. It's you're just there with these people, and you connect to them. Like at normal day-to-day life, I would think like, oh, what should I talk with this 18-year-old girl or this 50-year-old Australian guy which just broke up his relationship and walks the Camino with me? So I would never consider like even the value of talking to them, but it's so valuable, and they teach you a lot about yourself and life in general. So that's amazing. So I think, yeah, you totally nailed it. The people which you meet and talk about, it's like getting a family.
Yeah. And
So
I certainly like I had a friend that I made on the Te Araroa Trail who I sort of we walked on and off. It's quite nice to be able to walk with people when you're not as you want, but we would walk on and off, and do supply runs together and stuff like that for the last month of the trail. And that was 3 years ago, and I'm still in like pretty regular contact with her. So the friends that you can make, just lifelong.
Exactly. For me, it's like 2006. It's also like 6 years ago, actually. I was also planning on returning this or the last year, but the pandemic just hit, and you were able to walk it, but it was like basically you had to wear a mask all the time, and also like the distancing stuff. So I figured, oh, that's not the same. I don't want it to be that limited, and I think it wouldn't it wouldn't be the same experience. So I'm just postponing it to when everything is normal again. So
yeah. I think walking from village to village during a global pandemic has got its problems.
Yeah, exactly. And you've done some crazy adventures, I think. What was the most crazy experience so far, and how are you dealing with time during the pandemic where traveling is like limited? Are you like eager to get out? I saw you ran a marathon through the desert or stuff like that.
Yeah, so it was a 240-kilometer ultra marathon through the Sahara Desert, which is called the Marathon des Sables. So most people in New Zealand haven't heard of it, but a lot of people in Europe might, because it's run by a French guy. So that was the craziest thing that I've ever done. In terms of the pandemic, we've been really lucky in New Zealand. So we had a really, really stringent lockdown for the first sort of 6 to 8 weeks of the pandemic, and we stamped COVID out. And like since then, like life is totally basically back to normal in New Zealand, and has been for months and months and months. And so I as long as I'm traveling locally, I haven't been restricted. But certainly for that first sort of 6-week period where we were, all under house arrest, so to speak. I mean, for all the right reasons. I got to the end. So we had different levels of lockdown, and every time we'd go down a level, I would go and do the most extreme thing that I could do at that level. So the first time that we got down a level, I went and ran what's usually a 3-day hike. And then on the time when we basically got out of our lockdown, the day we got out of lockdown, I woke up at 2 a.m, drove to a mountain called Ruapehu in the centre of the North Island of New Zealand, and ran around that, which took 16 hours. So I got back at about 10 p.m. at night. So that was my sort of like all this energy built up and built up and built up, all this tension of like, I need to get out and do something, and then bang, just all in one go.
Cool. Yeah, letting it all out. I'm so eager to do anything. Like, yeah, it's funny with New Zealand. I think at the end of this, at the beginning of this year, like January or February, there was this. So I'm big into CrossFit. It's my training routine, and I saw this on YouTube. There was this New Zealand CrossFit Championship. I don't know, this competition, and there were like spectators, and everything was outside. And I was like, "Is this from 2018 or what is this?" No, it's this year. This can't be. then I looked up New Zealand and COVID, and I was like, "Oh, these guys are pretty strict."
Yeah.
So that was so funny. I was like watching it, and I was like, is this from 2018?
Yeah, people will come back here from overseas. I have a friend who came back from overseas and was saying that, you see people like hugging in the streets and stuff, and almost like a meltdown.
So yeah, and I'm really interested in your, like, you explained a little bit about it, about your board, where you have this to-do list, and which is like it's divided into sections. Like I read like self, family and friends, and I think world. Can you tell us more about these sections, and what have you experienced are the most valuable lessons in each section since living in a tiny house?
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's a big question. What's my entire value system, and how does that work? Okay. So this all came out of walking the Te Awamutu Trail. Obviously, you've got a lot of time to think and reflect, and one of the things that I thought about was, what are my values that I want to underpin everything that I do. So the way I ended up splitting that up is it basically comes down to like looking after the well-being of different people or animals, and so I've got self on one side, because I think that it is important as a human, that you look after yourself and your own well-being. Like, you understand what you need more than anyone else, and your well-being does have value. And I think it's quite easy for people to get into quite an altruistic mindset, which is a great thing, but also to the point of sort of self-destruction. And I think that's where it becomes problematic, where you sort of put your own well-being on the side for other people, and whereas actually you need to look after yourself, so that you can support other people, because otherwise it's not sustainable. So I've got myself as the sort of first thing of, make sure that you're in a good state, mental, physical well-being, all of those things, because that allows you to do everything else. And then there's a whole load of things that sort of underpin that, or things that I wanted to do to work on that. So some of them were things in terms of like sort of regulating coffee and alcohol and food, and yoga and meditation, running, rock climbing, all these things that I sort of enjoy and contribute to my well-being, but are very much sort of centered around myself. And then the next step along is sort of your family and friends. And so for me, those are the people who are most important to me, but also the people who I can influence the most. I know them the best, and they're physically close, or the people that I understand well enough to be able to support. And so helping people with projects, so like helping other people with their tiny house builds. I have other friends who are building, and just other people with their projects, or if they're in a tight spot, helping them out. And then across from that, I've got world, which kind of encompasses everything else. And I guess in my worldview, so I'm a vegetarian for ethical reasons, and my worldview is basically that that anything that's able to suffer or probably has a consciousness, is something that we therefore have a responsibility to at least consider our impact on, if not make sure that we're positively impacting on. And so that whole category encompasses basically everybody else on the planet and all of the natural systems, particularly animals, but anything else that might affect animals. So for example, factory farming is something that I think is terrible, and in that sort of value scheme is something that's really negative value, and that we do a whole lot of damage to animals for relatively small benefit for people. And so there's things that then come out of that. So like intentions, being vegetarian, steering away from anything that's battery farms, but also you're doing other things that kind of support the wider environment. So the living in a tiny house contributes to that, but sort of minimizing my footprint, trying to use other methods of getting around aside from a car. So generally, when I was working in Hamilton, I would bike or run into work, and that just comes out of that that value of caring about the rest of the world, and then the intentions are that come out of that are, okay, well, don't take the car to work, be vegetarian, all of that sort of stuff. So does that cover it, or was there more that you?
No, perfect.
Oh.
I think that's exactly what I want to get out of the question.
Excellent.
And has there been like a teaching lesson in any of that which you really realized in living in a tiny house, like this, like a moment where you thought, oh yeah, I haven't thought about this in that way since living in a tiny house? Or was it just like,
that's a good question. I guess one of the things that only occurred to me after I lived in it was that, in fact, it's actually quite a luxurious way to live. So for a lot of people sort of my age and younger, I'm 29 at the moment, and in New Zealand, particularly at the moment with housing the way it is, most people under 30 are in a flatting situation, so you're sharing facilities. So where I am in Wellington at the moment is a shared accommodation, or it's a flat. I think there's a different term that's used overseas. I think New Zealand's the only people who call it a flat. But yeah, you share bathrooms, you share kitchens, and all of that sort of thing. Whereas with a tiny house, although the space is compact, you have all of that stuff to yourself, which is actually quite luxurious. And if you've planned your space well, it's not a difficult thing to live in a small space. In some ways, it's better because everything's closer to hand. You don't spend a whole lot of time cleaning stuff. So I honestly found that I probably had a much better, more sort of luxurious standard of living than I had in previous situations.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. So yeah. When I talk here about our tiny house plans, that's what I'm getting most of the time, from friends. Oh, you want to live that small? Where you gonna hang your laundry? Where you gonna?
Yeah, there's always a solution. I'm going to be telling you, your tiny house is too big. You need to make it smaller.
Yeah. And I'm always I'm fascinated by these thoughts because it's not even in my mind. So.
Yeah. How far along with your planning are you?
In Germany, it's really difficult to find a place at first before you even can think about building it or letting it build. So in Germany, there's a lot of laws in terms of how you build a house, where you can build a house, how it has to look. So there are even laws which way your roof has to turn and stuff like that. So it's really difficult to find a place if you're not wanna live really far off cities and stuff where you can work. So this is our main focus at the moment. We have flyers and stuff and talking with farmers if there's a way to put a tiny house on their property and help them with working on the farm and stuff like that. There's solutions like this. So this is our standpoint at the moment. Yeah.
Sounds like you need to come to New Zealand.
Yeah. So that's also a point, but it's gonna be, we have elections in Germany in September, I think, and it's going crazy. All the different what's Parteien in English? All the different
candidates.
Yeah, not really, but what they want to do is it's pretty crazy. One thing is they want to change the system of taxes from not based on your living, not based on the place you're living, so to the nationality of you. So if you're German and live in New Zealand, you still have to pay your taxes in Germany, for example. So they make it really hard to say, fuck off, I'm leaving the country, basically.
Yeah, because you'd have to give up your citizenship, wouldn't you, in order to stop paying tax?
Yeah, exactly. And citizenship. And that's really hard because depending on where you're going, it's pretty hard to get the new citizenship. So for example, if you go from, which is really popular here in Germany, if you go to Switzerland, which is a country just below Germany, you have to wait 12 years to get citizenship there. And you have to achieve some stuff working there for amount of years and stuff. So it's getting more and more complicated if these candidates get into the power, which it looks at this moment. So
12 years is a long time to pay tax to countries.
Yeah. So we see, but it's definitely on my mind to leave the country at some point if it's not enjoyable anymore. But but that leads into actually my last question.
Mhm.
And I'm a photographer, and I have this project which is about the search for extraterrestrial life. And
Mhm.
I'm always asking any guest, no matter from which standpoint of life he comes from or she comes from. So no matter if they have anything to do with the subject or photography at all, I always ask them, do you think mankind has to be an interplanetary species, and do you think we're gonna achieve it at some point?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's possible. Interplanetary or interstellar, because those are I think interplanetary.
Interplanetary.
Interplanetary, I think, is almost certainly going to happen. Like I think in terms of eventually having a settlement on Mars, like I think the technology basically exists. It's horrendously expensive, and there's obstacles that need to be overcome, but they're fairly, I think they're fairly minor in the scheme of things. You start getting into to greater distances than that, trying to go to the closest star. And yeah, you get into all sorts of interesting problems about, if you've got to make 100-year journey with only what you brought with you in a vacuum. It's also, I think that it's also, possible, but I think it's a much further stretch. Whereas I think, yeah, settlements on the moon, Mars, yeah, totally, it'll happen.
And do you think we're gonna make it, or do you think we're destroying ourselves before that's gonna happen?
I think we're pretty resilient. I think, you know, I, I, I think we are doing a lot of damage as we go, and that might have some pretty horrendous consequences for a lot of people. If there's a war, or if our ecological systems completely collapse, or climate change and things like that, I think that is the direction that we're going on. We might drastically reduce the carrying capacity of the planet. But even if we lost a lot of people through those sorts of processes, I think that humanity will bounce back and find ways of adapting to what happened, and that's definitely not a reason not to try and combat climate change, because the process of adapting to that sort of massive change would be devastating. But I think as a species, we're like the cockroaches that sort of, you just try and get rid of them and they just keep coming back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll make it.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think that's also one of the most interesting part of this research and project I'm doing, because like whenever I talk to professors or scientists which work in the field, there's always this part of the story which is like, if we would find like another species which is intelligent enough, that would be a game changer for humanity, because then it would be really like we're seeing the earth as a whole, and not like we're Americans, we're Europeans, we're black, we're white. That would be a game changer, and this is the most interesting part for me. Like, if we would have find something which is like on our level or above, that would be huge for humanity. It would change a lot of things.
There's a plot of a story, I think it was The Watchmen, where a character fakes an attack on Earth by aliens to unite the planet and make the Soviets and the Americans sort of join forces to fight against these aliens. They didn't actually exist in this story, but it'd definitely give us something to unify us if there was another other. We always seem to need another.
Yeah, exactly. And that may be also the reason why we haven't found something or somebody, because we're not on this level to even communicate with them, because we're not equal on the planet. I find it
Yeah,
pretty
no,
interesting.
it's quite possible. I'm sure you've come across the Fermi paradox before.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think one of the possible outcomes of the Fermi paradox is that there is a species that's so sophisticated that they're just watching us. Maybe, like watching us the way we watch ants. And they're just so sophisticated that we can't even comprehend or see them because they don't want to be seen. So, we can't rule it out.
Awesome. Yeah, Matt, we're almost at the end. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's really inspiring and interesting for our audience what you do, how your values are, and I can't wait to see your new tiny house then and how it will look. And yeah, thank you very much.
I look forward to talking to you again once, hopefully from the new tiny house. And it's been very enjoyable. Thanks very much, Tim.
That would be awesome. At the end, we usually have like a speed round, which I tell you some fact or name, and you tell me the first thing which comes to your mind. But this time I have a A or B part of it. So I'm telling you two things, and you say either the first one or the other one.
So you're going to say two things and I'll pick one. Is it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's eight picks. So
8 picks. Okay.
So the first one is efficiency or efficiency.
Sorry.
Efficiency or efficiency.
Oh, efficacy or efficiency. I'll go with efficacy.
Next one is easy, I think. Meats and vegetables or nuts and seeds.
Okay. Well, nuts and seeds. Yeah.
Some fruit or no sugar.
Some fruit.
Washing machine or dishwasher.
Washing machine.
Ladder or stairs.
Stairs.
Family or friends. This is hard.
Oh. Well, I consider my closest friends to be family, so I'm going to go with family.
All right. Running or lifting?
Running.
And the last one, religion or spirituality?
Spirituality.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Oh, I hope I got them right.